Good morning, you beautiful people. It is Kevin Tompkins here. Of course, it's Clock Management. A little solo stream today. We're going to be talking about every team that played in week 3. Going to try to condense this into pretty short time frame here. We got about an hour here, so let's go right into some things. Week 3 was pretty interesting as far as if you liked lower leg injuries. I guess that was a great slate for you. If you were into block kicks, I mean, even more so, that was a slate for you. But excited to talk about week 3, because I think week 3 we have 3 data points now. Very interesting to talk about everything that happened in week 3, and let's go right into it, because I do want to talk about the Arizona Cardinals, because obviously a lot is going on specifically with them. We'll get away from the elephant in the room, and yeah, look, we are on brand here, Lou. We got to manage clock somehow. So that's how we're going to do it today. Very excited to do so. So look, Arizona Cardinals, we'll skip the elephant in the room for right now, because obviously there's a lot going on with the running game there, with the injury to James Conner. But look, I'm scared a little bit for Marvin Harrison, because the thesis for Marvin Harrison going into year 2 was that in drafts he was at a much better price compared to his round 1, round 2 ADP from last season. That was a bit frothy, and then he disappointed on that. So I think he kind of got a little bit of stink from that. But the year 2, he's going to be fine. Now he's going in like the third, fourth round. Not a lot of pressure on him. He's got Trey McBride. He doesn't have to be the top guy, but he really hasn't done much to separate himself. Like, let's take a look at Marvin Harrison right now. What he's done through 3 games. We're looking at 10 catches, 142 yards, just 16 targets. That's a little over 5 targets a game there. But just looking at some of the peripheral stuff, like let's go into targets per route run, stuff like that. Like 15.7% targets per route run. Like, that's not good. Yards per route run, 1.39. We're not looking at a guy that, was one of the best wide receivers in football, one of the best. He was 1 and 2 he was going over Malik Neighbors in rookie drafts. So I think that's something where we have to be a bit scared into year 2, and we're still not seeing what we want to see of Marvin Harrison. Something that is good, his ADOT has shortened up from about 15 yards in year 1 to about 12. So that's at least good there, but it does not mean we're not like totally scared by the Marvin Harrison stuff. I think you have to downgrade him a little bit in fantasy, where you weren't starting him as a wide receiver 2. You had to draft him in the 3rd and 4th round. Now, it's not a fun proposition. It's not a fun click to put Marvin Harrison into your lineup. So I'm definitely downgrading him there. Trey McBride, 5 for 43 and a touchdown, 88% of the routes, like totally fine with that. That's what you're expecting out of Trey McBride. But this is a pretty underachieving offense when you talk about all the passing game pieces, because you're not starting a Michael Wilson. They're just guys out there taking routes, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones, stuff like that. I guess we can get into the elephant in the room now with Trey Benson, his injury that was confirmed to be an Achilles injury. So we're looking at Trey Benson right now, and Trey Benson's a guy that is very interesting in terms of his year 1 to year 2 stuff, because year 1 he was taking a bit of a back seat to Amari DiMercato in terms of some of the passing game stuff, some third down, and Trey Benson was kind of a James Conner only spell, where if you needed some carries, he was the one to give it to you rather than DiMercato, even though DiMercato was still getting that workload. But looking at Benson now in year 2 with Conner healthy, I mean, for the first 2 games, that was stuff he completely absorbed DiMercato's role. First 2 weeks of the season, DiMercato only had 1 offensive snap. He was primarily a special teams player. So seeing Benson being able to take some of the passing stuff in addition to James Conner, that was really looking to a standalone role. If that Conner stuff hadn't happened as far as getting hurt, I think now so Trey Benson is going to be the guy. And James Conner had out in his contract anyway to be, he likely wasn't going to be an Arizona Cardinal after this season. So this could be the audition here for Trey Benson to see if he could be the lead back for the Arizona Cardinals going forward. So I do like him as like a lower to mid RB2 where you know that there's going to be probably, I'd say about 55 to 60% of the team rushing attempts every week. I still think they sign a guy off the street. I don't know if they give DeMercado like that second back role, right away. I do believe they have Michael Carter still on the practice squad. So that could be something where either they bring somebody up or they sign somebody off of free agency or somebody else's practice squad. Because there are backs floating out there. Not saying they're any good, but definitely wheels up at least for anybody that did roster trade Benson, drafted him, and so that's interesting there. Let's go over to the Atlanta Falcons, where they scored absolutely 0 points. Lost to the Carolina Panthers 32-0. So not too much, but it's really good to see that Bijan Robinson did still put up 16 fantasy points in a game where the Atlanta Falcons scored 0. Obviously, the receiving stuff, that stuff has been awesome for Bijan Robinson going forward. 13 for 72 on that front. In a game that Tyler Algier only had 1 carry, when the Falcons are blown out, when they're in the trailing script, you're not going to see much Tyler Algier. So that's pretty par for the course there. You saw, special teamer Nate Carter end up getting, 7 carries in that kind of blowout to kind of salt away that game and, pretty much get out of Dodge and wave the white flag. Darnell Mooney being back for the Falcons is definitely good for consolidating some of the targets there, him in London. And then obviously Kyle Pitts too, which Kyle Pitts, that entire thesis for hoping he could kind of be more of a route runner in, this season is definitely coming to fruition. Last season, the Falcons did lead the NFL in 11 personnel usage. They were using a lot of Ray McCloud. This season, through at least the first 2 weeks, they had actually led the league in 12 personnel. So they were getting Raymond McCloud off the field. They were using Charlie Warner as their blocker, and then getting Kyle Pitts as far as utilization as the tight end there in 12 personnel off the line. So very good to see there. Though Pitts is still playing on the line as well, but you're getting him in a more advantageous receiving position. So that's why he's kind of rising up a little bit in terms of like public perception. So that's good to see. And that's if that could be like a trio of consolidation there, especially, with London, with Mooney. We got to see more from Penix, though. The fact that you're getting Kirk Cousins on the field, probably not a great thing. We were all sold on Drake London in the preseason. I don't know if it's 3 weeks of meh. I think Drake London is still fantastic. I'm just a little bit concerned about Michael Penix more than Drake London himself. He's done pretty much everything you've wanted to. Some of the efficiency stuff isn't there the last 2 weeks. The first week, 14 targets, 8 for 55. Some inefficiency there, and I think that's a lot of that's tied to the quarterback, but we're still looking at a pretty strong, route percentage. We're still looking at pretty much almost 24% targets per route run from Drake London. So I think that that stuff, that per route stuff that you want to see him earning targets, and he's absolutely doing that. It's just you're not getting some of the production on top of that, which a 7.7 yard ADOT, that's pretty short for a receiver like that. Usually you want to see your receivers between 10 and 11%, or 10 and 11 yards, I should say. So I'm not too concerned about London. I'm really more concerned about Michael Penix than I am of Mr. Drake London, who I do think could be a wide receiver one. Certainly going forward, he's going to get the volume there. We have not gone through the Baltimore Ravens. They do play tonight against the Detroit Lions. That should be a very fun game. For the Buffalo Bills, look, it's the Buffalo Bills. They're not a condensed offense. You're going to get like a new leading target almost every week. First week, it was Keon Coleman. Obviously this week it was Dalton Kincaid that they were featuring in the offense against the Miami Dolphins. Keon Coleman's still going to be running a lot of the routes. Khalil Shakir is still running a lot of the routes. After that, it's a literal toss-up between, the Josh Palmers, the Elijah Moores that they've been working in. Dawson Knox is always going to be on the field. I think what you can hang your hat on for this offense is that even though he might not be on the field a ton, based on compared to guys like Jonathan Taylor, compared to guys like Bijan Robinson, compared to guys like, Chase Brown, that are not just taking a lot of the carries, but always on the field. James Cook is as efficient as it gets in terms of maximizing the touches that he does get. And the Bills are really good with that. So I do love what, obviously what we're seeing from James Cook. We're not seeing a lot of like the ancillary stuff too. They're getting on the field. The Ty Johnsons are getting on the field. Ray Davis isn't even getting on the field that much compared to last season. But that's still good for James Cook, obviously. That gets him on the field 70% of the team rushing attempts on Thursday against Miami. Hilariously, on the Thursday Night Football broadcast with Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, the Jackson Hawes is the number one tight end on PFF. Not exactly a great endorsement of your service there. Obviously, that's PFF grade, and that's probably on like 7 routes, but it's not great. But he did score a touchdown here, so I guess that was slightly validated there. Other than that, for fantasy, you really can't. Like, you're still rostering Shakir. If you picked up Coleman after his week 1, you're still rostering him too. But you have to temper your expectations because Keon Coleman is as boomer bust as it gets. Anybody in this offense, as far as the passing game goes, is boomer bust. So buyer beware there. Let's go over to the Carolina Panthers, who put it on the Atlanta Falcons 30-0, like we talked about before. Even in that blowout, there wasn't a lot of offense there. They had a couple defensive touchdowns, I believe. Ted McMillan still got, so inefficient volume, but volume nonetheless. 9 targets, 3 for 48. No touchdown, 101 air yards, though, 93% of the routes. Everything you like to see there. And I'm very, pleased at what we've seen from Ted McMillan. Looking at, we're looking at 9 targets per game. Almost 40% of the air yards in total for Ted McMillan. Everything that you want to see from a rookie wide receiver, outside of like some of the official production, we are seeing here. We're looking at 40% of the air yards. We're looking at a pretty healthy ADOT. He's running almost 90% of the routes. Almost a 2 yards per route run, earning targets at 24%. Getting a target on 24% of the routes he runs. It's a very healthy role for Ted McMillan. So I think looking at that from, his metrics, I think that's really good to see. And I think you got to kind of lock him in as a wide receiver 2 in this offense for fantasy. The guys like Hunter Renfrow, those guys come and go where you can start them on a situational basis, depending on the matchup. That's about it, though. I do want to see how Jalen Coker does come back into this offense and what role he takes immediately. With Xavier Legette out, that let David Moore go out and run some cardio. 1 target, 96% routes. So not super great there. But you got to figure, obviously, Legette comes back, and they're going to give him every chance. We want to bury him, and trust me, I have been no stranger to the Xavier Legette burial on social media, certainly. But he's going to get every chance to, do what he does, certainly, and earn routes and earn targets and stuff like that. It may not be efficient, but he's going to get that opportunity. And then Jalen Coker is probably going to work more into the slot there for the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, Ted McMillan is locked up on the outside as the X receiver. So definitely like that. Tavian Sanders has some value, here and there, matchup dependent. Once we start getting into the bye weeks, I think it's going to be very interesting to, he's going to be a decision point for like some of the teams that are streaming tight ends. So that's a thing. And then Chuba Hubbard, the role is safe. Rico Dowdle got 10 carries because of the game script there when they were kind of just salting away that game. So that role is a little bit bigger than we anticipated, but that's really just game script related versus anything like that. Yeah, Jatavian Sanders is now hurt with an ankle. Who isn't hurt with an ankle injury after week 3? And it's for some reason, if Sanders doesn't play, we are not looking at Tommy Tremble. We're not looking at Mitchell Evans. You're not looking at these guys. You're looking at some of the other fringe options on other teams. Let's go to the Chicago Bears, because Chicago Bears are fun for like the first time that I can remember since like maybe the Justin Fields Chicago Bears. So looking at that, Adrian, I do see your question there. I'm going to get to those in a little while. So if you can hang tight, we're going through here, going through each team here. Chicago Bears, 4 touchdowns from Caleb, almost 300 yards. That 300-yard bonus would have been really, helpful in DFS, but, beggars can't be choosers. We got to take the hits when we can get them. Romadunze, Luther Burden, that flea flicker touchdown was awesome for Luther Burden. You're not quite getting the burdening I was hoping for. Still 31% of the routes, even though he did 3 catches, 3 for 101 and a touchdown. The roll is not as strong as, we would certainly liked it after 3 weeks. Let's take a look at Luther Burden here. His routes are coming up slowly. 31% now from 23 and 13. So, we're seeing a slower ramp up for him than like some of the other receivers. So, it's still good that they're using him. Like Ben Johnson's getting into his, golf bag of, pulled out his 9-iron there to get Luther Burden that touchdown. So definitely like that. But it's going to be a process for Luther Burden. If you have the room on your roster, he's definitely worth a hold. But I'm not prioritizing him as far as if you need the room right now. Like if you are staring down the barrel of 0-3 right now on your team, it doesn't really behoove you to keep a guy like Luther Burden that could be, if you need that spot for production right away. It doesn't really do super well to keep that roster spot. Now, Roma Dunze, we have to start looking at. It's like maybe close to a top 12 guy, like the way he's been going. And let's look at Roma Dunze I'm talking about. 25 targets. We're looking at 16 for 227 and 4 touchdowns, but over 2 yards per route run right now, earning targets at a 23% clip. That's what we want. That's exactly what we want. When we get some efficiency in this offense, this is what can happen for a guy like Roma Dunze that was running all the routes last season. Lou, I'm very glad that you are not hurt with an ankle. I am still hurt kind of with a back, but I have been, off the injury report at least, and I need you to be off the injury report going forward for Optimus Fantasy as well. But yeah, so I'm very excited about Roma Dunze's role in this offense. And it's kind of come at the expense of DJ Moore, who DJ Moore has been used kind of like in the short area to get some design touches. And I just don't know if the target volume is there for him anymore. But I still think he's like a decent piece of fantasy. If you drafted him like in the 5th round, I think he's a totally fine wide receiver 3, just based on the strength of this offense. Let me take a look here. So I'll answer the question here. Hall versus Miami, Hampton versus the Giants, Cadabo versus the Chargers, Dobbins versus Cincy. The way that Sean Payton's been using Dobbins, I'm actually pretty into him, but I do like the role against the Giants. I know that's a tough front to run on, but the role is going to be awesome if there's going to be no Najee Harris for Marion Hampton. So I do like him. As far as the passing game, kind of keeping teams honest, opening stuff up for the run, and then if Hampton's going to be getting some of the receiving stuff as well. I do love that. And then how much fab for Cam Scatabo? Twitch gang here, Forever Mighty. I'm probably a good third of my fab. Cam Scatabo is a guy you don't want to miss on. Now, Tyrell Tracy has a shoulder injury, too. We got to see what's up with that. But those two were ships passing in the night anyway. So between him and Cam Scatabo and Tyrell Tracy. So I do very much enjoy seeing Scatabo get a lot of run last night and then look really good doing it. I would definitely probably bet a third of my fab and then even more. If you're short on running backs, I would go over that. I think it's everything for fab is like team dependent. But if you're short on running backs, I would not hesitate to put in a lot more for a guy like Cam Scatabo, who I think can be a starting running back, like we saw with Tyrone Tracy last year. It took a little bit later. We got that in like 7. Yeah, if you're shallow running back, go north of 50. Like that's a guy that's why you're saving your fab. Those are the guys that are why you're saving your fab. You're not saving your fab for the Keon Coleman's or the Troy Franklins. You are saving them for running backs like that, like Cam Scatabo. So let's go over. And the DeAndre Swift stuff, that's fine. Kyle Monungai, with Roshan not being used on in the offense now. I think we're looking at it's easily Colin Nungai's, contingent role behind DeAndre Swift. And then also Colston Loveland. We 1 for 31, only 17% of the routes. Like we're not really seeing a lot out of Colston Loveland. The role is not really growing. His routes have come down a little bit. And I don't know if that's they're working in Loveland a lot slower or whatnot, or if they're just more out there. You would figure maybe in a game where they were kind of up and kind of putting foot to throat on the Dallas Cowboys, that Loveland would get in a lot more. But we kind of have to take that as it is. And he's almost the Luther Burden of tight ends, where if you don't have the room to roster a second tight end, because you either drafted Loveland in combination with another tight end, or you drafted him as a first and then drafted a boring option after that, the Andrew Cooper yin and yang. So if that's what you did, I'm totally fine with dropping Loveland if you have an option, or there's options if it's a shallow league. If you have the room, if you have the luxury to keep him. That's about what I'm doing there. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who were just an absolute dumpster fire yesterday. With Jake Browning at the helm, they definitely got Isaiah Rodgers yesterday, 2 defensive touchdowns. They got Brian Flores just in totality. So looking at Jamar Chase, he's probably not going to be the overall wide receiver one with Jake Browning at the quarterback position. You're probably not expecting that. You're still expecting low end wide receiver one production though. I think that's still very fair. There's going to be a lot of targets. They're going to see better days. They're not going to be playing the Minnesota Vikings every single week. I think T. Higgins is where you kind of have to draw some of the line in the sand with these wide receivers and these pass catchers, because T. Higgins is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but as the second guy in the Cincinnati offense, that I'm not even sure, can support more than one wide receiver more than Jamar Chase. I think you got to kind of downgrade T. Higgins to a wide receiver 3 or a flex play right now until we see more. T. Higgins has been historically awesome. Going back to, the last few seasons, he got paid this offseason with Jamar Chase, with Mike Gesicki. Joe Burrow wanted that, that core together. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the intent downfield. We're seeing out 30% of air yards. But the 1 yard per route run, 15% of targets per route run, that's just very subpar for T. Higgins. Those are all by far career lows. So I think we got to see more for T. Higgins. The 3 fumbles. I know. Fant, Pirine, and then Jamar Chase. Very New England Patriotsian, a Patriots-esque performance from the Cincinnati Football Bengals. So, definitely have to downgrade some of these guys. You're not starting any of the tight ends either. That's just a tight end committee. They ended up working Cam Grandy, I think, for the first game this season. Which is never good. You're used to maybe the Tanner Hudsons, and you're always going to have the Drew Samples out there as the blocking guy, and Mike Gesicki. They re-signed Mike Gesicki and they barely used him. If you haven't dropped him by now, I think he's a clear drop as well. Chase Brown, 10 carries for 3 yards. Not great, Bob. So the role is still pretty strong for him. I think just because they got blown out, that's why we saw more Taj Brooks. That's why we saw more Samaj Piran. I just don't know if we're going to get, because through the first 2 games, we were at about 92% of the team rushing attempts for Chase Brown on the season through the first 2 weeks. I don't know if we're going to get that going forward, but we're still going to see a strong role from Chase Brown. So I think things are going to get a lot better for him. Obviously, we're not going to get 10 carries for 3 yards every week. So I think people can overreact. And I think he's kind of a buy low, honestly, in terms of the role that you're getting for a guy like that. You're going to see better Jake Browning as well. So even though the line is pretty bad in Cincinnati, I'm still not super worried, because some of the receiving stuff can come along for the ride with Chase Brown and a strong role. Let's go over to the Cleveland Browns, who upset my Packers 13-10. there wasn't too much going on in the receiving game. It's pretty spread out there. Like David Njoku, 5 for 40. Our boy Harold Fannin, 3 for 25. Who had, by the way, one of the best catches of the day, going through breaking 4 tackles to get a first down. Definitely awesome to see from Harold Fannin. But other than that, it was pretty much a rock fight between the Packers and the Browns. Jerry Jeudy is going to get there. You do love to see it with Fannin, absolutely. Cedric Tillman, 3 for 26. Isaiah Bond's getting worked in a little bit more. He's not startable by any means. I think Cedric Tillman's on the borderline too, and you can kind of even maybe throw Jerry Jeudy in there. But at the very least, with Joe Flacco, you're getting pass volume. Even in that game, 38 pass attempts, which is good. They just kind of spread it out a little more than typical. But the main prevailing theme here is Quinshon Judkins. We have to start thinking about as a low end RB2 now. And I think he's pretty locked in because Dylan Sampson got kind of phased out a little bit with some of the Judkins stuff. And if we're going to see the workload match the efficiency, because last week he was 6 yards per carry. Now 18 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown in this game. Jerome Ford's always going to be out there, but we have to start thinking, Quinshon Judkins, the shoe is going to drop eventually with a possible suspension, whether that happens or not. But as long as he is out there playing and you have him on your roster, I think he has to be in your lineup, full stop. So I don't care who they play. The fact that he did that against the Packers, I think was really encouraging to see. I know they had some offensive line issues as well. Believe it was Bitonio and Conklin on the injury report, and I know Bitonio played. So yeah, I'm definitely upgrading Quinshon Judkins for sure. RB9 on the week as well. Going over to the Dallas Cowboys. Sucks for CeeDee Lamb. We did see him. I think he only played 7 snaps in week 3. Had the ankle injury, did not come. He tried to come back, and then it did not look great for him. So, yeah, I don't know. See, here's the thing. I don't know if it's really Taj time. I mean, these rookies got to get worked in. P. Ryan, I think he's definitely right for the nice farm family upstate. I don't know if Chase Brown is terrible. I think Chase Brown is usable in fantasy. I just don't know if he's outright terrible. In terms of where a lot of those second round running backs were, I preferred Bucky for sure. I preferred Jonathan Taylor for sure. And I think a lot of the volumes, he was a very volume driven guy versus an efficient running back. But I don't think he's terrible. And now, I think it's only really looking terrible because Joe Burrow is not there. Chase Brown was totally fine with Joe Burrow, and now we're seeing the worst iteration of the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that's, that definitely plays in a part of it. And yeah, Taj Brooks he hasn't seen snaps on the first 2 games. This is the first game where he actually saw him out on the field. So he's been active, but not, in the offensive capacity. So that's where we have to kind of take that into consideration too, where you're only getting there in a blowout. So I think we got to pump the brakes on that. And that's where it looked like Taj Brooks was going to be the contingent play when Zach Moss got released. I certainly think that, that's a long way coming for Taj Brooks. Yeah, I just don't know about that right yet, but moving to the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. The CeeDee Lamb is out. I don't think we have to worry about some of the target stuff with some of the other guys. George Pickens, 5 for 68 and a touchdown on 9 targets. I think he had the same exact line last week too. I think he was at 5 for 68 and a touchdown, which was pretty funny to me. It feels like deja vu all over again. Jake Ferguson, Travis Kelceing his way to 14 targets, 13 for 82. CeeDee Lamb's out. I don't know we might see some more design stuff from Devontae Turpin because he's always going to be involved in the offense. We're going to see George Pickens kind of be the feature wide receiver there. CeeDee Lamb, I believe he said he feels like he's going to do everything he can to play next week as well against the Packers on Sunday Night Football. I know that's a tough timetable and a tough thing for fantasy managers to go out and roster him, or at least start him because of the uncertainty playing on Sunday Night Football. But yeah, I do think this offense is a bit like the Philadelphia Eagles in terms of you have condensed offense at the top. Um, and then, with some of the other guys that don't play a super lot, like Flournoy played quite a bit, actually. And Jalen Tolbert plays, but he doesn't earn like targets typically. So I'm not super worried about any of the other options there, but it's really just Pickens and Ferguson that I think this offense condenses down to in the event that Landon does not play. Javonte Williams, I think we have to kind of just, I was wrong. We were wrong. I don't know if he has the burst yet, and I think he's been put in good situations. It also helps being in the same backfield as Miles Sanders, where if you put me in a backfield with Miles Sanders, I think I'd look pretty good too. If you're getting 6.6 fantasy points receiving on top of like a decent rushing stat line, like over 7.6 yards per carry, like even in a game like that, still double digit points is pretty solid. So I'm okay with Javonte Williams as like an RB2. I think eventually we're going to kind of see the fall here, but as he's going right now, I think he's a totally fine like RB2 that is locked into volume. Denver Broncos. I think we got to wait on the RJ Harvey stuff because Sean Payton has his favorites. And what if J.K. Dobbins was the RJ Harvey all along? That's what we're looking at because RJ Harvey kind of got scaled back with some of the work there. Only 5 touches in week 3. 30% of the routes, 29% of the snaps. J.K. Dobbins is seeing a full-time role right now with 11 carries, 83 yards, and a touchdown. And is getting, a couple targets here and there. But, I think it's a perfectly fine. For where you drafted him, you're loving having J.K. Dobbins. Eventually, I think it's going to be R.J. Harvey's backfield, and that's when we're going to have to be, kind of cognizant of when is that changeover happening. But for right now, this is always the thesis of the play where J.K. Dobbins was an early season guy, and eventually he's going to see the way to R.J. Harvey. We just got to see when that's going to be. In the passing game, pour one out for the people that did spend a lot of fab on Troy Franklin. You got your routes. If you're in your routes league, I think you're definitely very happy with the sheer amount of routes he did run, 94%. The 2 for 8 was not great, but Courtland Sutton kind of, after last week, we were a little worried about Courtland Sutton about, we're going to see a changeover of Troy Franklin. I didn't believe that for a second because I've known Sean Payton for a long time and know what he's up to. And he's back to his old bag with, giving just Courtland Sutton a ton of volume, 100% of the route participation. So no worries there. I know the Broncos did try to get in Marvin Mims. A lot of deep shots to him that did not work out too, hence the 95 yards there. But other than that, Tyler Bidet also saw a pretty reduced role in the offense. So I think we're looking at just the 2 backs there between Harvey and Dobbins. I don't think we have to worry about some of the passing game stuff with Bidet much longer. So that's nice to see that condensed. Lions have not played yet. Green Bay Packers. So some of the stuff happened that, we kind of were able to prognosticate. Dontavian Wicks was the primary slot player. Ran to 68% of the routes, though. I was actually kind of surprised that he did not run more and rotate more on the outside. And that was because they gave Matthew Golden a season-high 84% routes as well. Look, not in the targets per route run leagues. That's where I had my Puka Nacua and my Jackson Smith and Jigba. But look, Keon Coleman and Troy Franklin, if you're in the routes league, you're crushing. So that's where we're at there. Romeo Doubs is always going to be on the field as the extra receiver, 94% of the routes. That's nothing new. Josh Jacobs getting 9 targets and leading the team in this rock fight of a game that Green Bay absolutely gave away. That's not going to be the norm. You're probably going to end up seeing those targets spread out to like other guys, probably, seeing them spread out to Golden, Dobbs, and Wicks. And Kraft as well. Kraft was pretty limited, obviously on the injury report as well with a knee. Still ran 71% of the routes. Breaking. Look, we are a forward-thinking show here. So we do have some breaking news, and I will bust it out. Look at that. Breaking literally. Well, not literally, but dislocated shoulder for Tyrone Tracy, expected to miss some time. Yeah. So first off, pour one out for Tyrone Tracy. Hope you can find your shoulder wherever you located it. Hopefully you locate that soon. But yeah, it's wheels up for Cam Scatabo, at least for the next few weeks. So yeah, I would say unload the clip of Fab on Cam Scatabo now. It's going to be, there's going to be some issues there with the Giants just because they're not going to be in a lot of games where they're going to be back and forth with teams. So that, but his usage in the receiving game, I think, is going to kind of dispel some of that other stuff. So, 50% of the Fab, maybe a little bit more depending on how hard up. Easy for me to say how hard up you are at running back. So, definitely like that. But getting back to the Packers stuff here, it was good to see Matthew Golden get a little more run here. I did play him in DFS. I thought he was a kind of a squeaky wheel this week with no Jaden Reed, with Tucker Kraft banged up. So 4 for 52. We definitely saw his best game. We definitely saw them actually make an attempt to get Matthew Golden into the offense. So that was fine to see. But other than that, in a game like this where Jordan Love only had 31 dropbacks, it was everything was pretty spread out, and there was not a lot of production, especially in the run game. Where, look, my pick for defensive rookie of the year, Mason Graham, he's been at the forefront of teams, the Browns absolutely shutting down teams in the run game. Chase Brown had an awful, I think, 2 yards per carry in week 1, shut down Derrick Henry last week. Now this week, 16 for 30 for Josh Jacobs. Like, you're not running on the Cleveland Browns. Like, I think that's pretty fair to say. Mason Graham is an absolute game wrecker, and I do think that nobody in the NFL, not even just among rookies, has had more of an impact on one team's side of the ball as Mason Graham has on that defense. But yeah, another thing too, where we saw a little bit of a flippening with, Chris Brooks is getting a lot of involvement as the kind of backup third down role to Josh Jacobs. We saw that flip a little bit to Emmanuel Wilson. So you could probably just pencil him in as the contingent back. You're still not rostering either guy, but that's just a little interesting note there for the Green Bay Packers. Moving on to the Houston Texans, where CJ Stroud is sun running the Kyle Pitts career arc in terms of having an awesome rookie season and then just kind of crapping the bed after that. So Nico Collins is still our generation's Julio Jones, 11 targets, 8 for 104, and a touchdown. You'd love to see that. Christian Kirk, first game back, inefficient, 8 targets, 3 for 25, 103 air yards. So they're trying to get him down the field a little bit more too, kind of harkening back to the days where he was not in the slot in Arizona. So interesting to see there. Otherwise, too many routes for Xavier Hutchinson. The Justin Watson was not active or he did not play an offensive snap. I don't believe he was active, actually. I think they had Braxton Berrios and he was a healthy scratch. But still, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are not factors in this offense right now. Higgins is probably the guy you want to keep on your bench eventually to take some of the routes that Xavier Hutchinson is getting right now. But kind of in the same boat of like the Luther Burden. If you don't have the room, if you need that roster spot, then go get him. Get somebody else to take that spot if you don't want to wait on a guy like Higgins. Other than that, Woody Marks has kind of been infringing on Nick Chubb. Like, neither back is like super great. Woody Marks had more, moments where he looked better than Nick Chubb. So yeah, that was a guy that Woody Marks you're holding on to in terms of somebody that can start getting a more of a market share in that offense versus Nick Chubb, where, look, we've seen it before. And I know the offensive line is not great in Houston either. But if Woody Marks can make up for some of that with the receiving game, then, I think you don't have to worry as much about some of the between the tackle stuff. So I do like that there as far as getting Woody Marks on rosters. If he's for some reason out there, that's a guy I think you want to hold on to see if the role is going to grow even more. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, who, look, after 3 games, I think we kind of got to, they're for real. as I look at yeah, no, and also no. I think I alluded to it, but there's nobody else you really want on this. You want nothing else but Nico Collins. Um, Christian Kirk, I think is like fine in like that Adam Thielen way, where there's probably going to be some target earning there. You're probably not getting a lot of efficiency. I don't even think he has the ceiling of like an Adam Thielen in this specific offense, where at least Bryce Young has, is a little bit more spry. Like CJ Stroud has looked awful the last like season and a half, to where you can't trust anybody else other than Nico Collins in this offense. That includes Dalton Schultz. That includes, anybody else they kind of want to throw out there. So, for the Colts, typical Michael Pittman, solid game as the X receiver there, 93% of the routes. Tyler Warren had a subpar game on 89% of the routes. Like, that's fine. That's going to happen. I don't know if you guys heard Jonathan Taylor's pretty good. Jonathan Taylor looking like the 2024 Saquon Barkley, where the thesis of that play was, is he going to be able to get some of the receiving work to help buoy him a little bit? And I think that's what we're starting to see now with Jonathan Taylor having some receiving floor on top of the obvious gifts he has running the ball. And if the Indianapolis Colts are going to be up in games and Daniel Jones is actually posing as a threat, whether it's downfield or just even in the passing game, because that's something they have not had. There's no teams were scared of the passing attack in Indianapolis, like to a degree where Jonathan Taylor had the runway he currently has now. So if I were redrafting, I think Jonathan Taylor would certainly be a 101 candidate. I think you got to put guys like Bijan in there too, and I think Puka Nacua deserves that as well. But if you had to gun to my head, Jonathan Taylor would, if we were redrafting 2025 fantasy, Jonathan Taylor would be on 101, I think. Just based on what we've seen in this offense, knowing just the absolute ceiling that he has. And I think we've dismissed that ceiling for quite a bit just because of the surroundings there. And who knew it was going to take a Duke quarterback like Daniel Jones to pull everything together here. So definitely something you love to see there. Other than that, you got your best ball pieces. You got your Alec Pierce's, running 70% of the routes, 4 for 67. Totally fine there. I will. We're going to talk about Tyreek in a second, so I'll hit that when we talk about the Dolphins here on just a couple teams. The Jacksonville Jaguars, though, I am very concerned about just the state of their offense right now, because it does not look very cohesive right now. Brian Thomas, 3 straight weeks of just inefficiency, 2 for 55 on 6 targets today in week 3. And let's look, 24 targets, 7 catches for 115 yards, 1 yards per route run. You're still earning some targets, like that's totally fine, but you're not getting any efficiency whatsoever there. And whether that's the Brian Thomas wrist injury or just Trevor Lawrence in general, like I think that still kind of remains to be seen. But I think you got to downgrade Brian Thomas Jr. just a little bit, just because we know the blow up is it's gonna get there. We just kind of got to be patient for it. And I know it's hard to be patient in fantasy, especially if you're not winning games. If you drafted Brian Thomas in the first round or the beginning of the second round, I think that's a guy that, you need answers on right away. So I understand that completely. But I do think that, you still got to start him as a wide receiver 2 every week. Now, Travis Hunter, that's a guy you're absolutely holding on to, but you're benching, at least for right now. We're still seeing the routes there, around like the 60% range. Let me pull that up here. Yeah. Started out 82% of the routes and kind of settled into like the 60% range. And I believe he was at about the same on defense as well. But yeah, so we're not seeing as much design stuff, at least last week, out of Travis Hunter. So I think we just have to kind of bench him for right now until they kind of figure out a groove of how they want to utilize Travis Hunter, what they want to do with him. And it really wasn't that fruitful for like anybody else in the offense. Like I know De'Ami Brown's routes have like shot way down. They wanted to get Parker Washington on the field for some reason as well. 10 targets, team leading, 4 for 34. Brenton Strange has a fine role where he's like a streaming tight end every week. always running like 72, 73% of the routes. I think he ran more than that the first couple weeks here. Yeah, he ran 84% of the routes in week 2, 70%. So the role is like decently strong to where you're still getting decent production out of him each week. So I do like that there as far as a streaming tight end. I think you can do a lot worse than a guy like Brenton Strange because the role behind him, they're both blocking guys between Johnny Mutt and Hunter Long. So you don't have to worry about like guys taking a lot off the top. I know Hunter Long had a touchdown in week 1. The backfield, though, like Travis Etienne's like totally fine. This is one of the backfields, though, that I think Travis Etienne can be usurped without an injury from Bashal Tutin. But I still think with the Bashal Tutin stuff, we have to kind of press a little bit of not a pause, but like slower roll a little bit in wanting that thesis to happen, and myself included. Because I think Bashal Tutin's awesome. He still has not had a negative play yet this season in all of his touches. 6 for 21, had a touchdown as well. The touches will get there, I think, for Tutin, but I think we have to kind of slow our roll a little bit there. And then Quinn Allen getting more routes than anybody else on the team as far as the running backs go. I think that was probably the more interesting note there, even though it didn't really get any production out of that. But just any routes that you get, independent of the guys that you want, is just going to keep, shaving away at some of the upside there. Yeah, it's really funny. Talked about wanting to do this in an hour, 46 minutes. So my clock management, we're looking at like Andy Reid, Philadelphia Eagles level clock management here, but we're going to get through all these teams here. Kansas City, Tyquan Thornton, I guess, is our king here. 9 targets, 5 for 71 and a touchdown. I'm very interested to see. I don't know. We're going to probably get Xavier Worthy back next week. It seems like, so that's going to be very interesting to see how that works in and who's kind of the odd man out. It kind of seems like that's going to be Juju Smith-Schuster. I think Hollywood Brown is pretty good to kind of get on the outside there. Travis Kelce, the famous podcaster, 4 for 26. Like the passing game is not holding much water here. And then just a kind of committee backfield. Like I'm fine with like not rostering Tyquan Thornton. I'm fine with not rostering Juju Smith-Schuster. You're probably rostering Hollywood Brown, but you don't feel good about starting him. So you're really waiting to see if Xavier Worthy is healthy. You're fine with him. You're rostering Travis Kelce as well. You just have to temper your expectations, knowing this is the Kelce that you're going to get. You're not going to get like the number one focal point of the offense when guys are injured. That's not what you're getting. For the Raiders, like going forward here, Trey Tucker, fool's gold, 8 for 145 and 3 touchdowns. We're not going to see that every week. I think this is one of the more fraudulent stat lines that we're going to get all season. That could have something to do with the middle of the field because a lot of Trey Tucker crossing routes, a lot of middle of the field stuff for Trey Tucker. We haven't seen a lot of Brock Bowers, at least this week, just because I think he's still a little bit banged up. Even though he ran 94% of the routes, like a 4 for 38 is like not great in a week where Geno Smith dropped back 34 times. Even Jacoby Myers didn't really carry the volume. It was just a weird week for the Raiders. Ashton Genty looked a lot better, I will say. And I still got to think we temper some expectations there because we're probably going to get more of a late season ramp up on that. But the line for Vegas is like not that good. And the fact that they're still giving Zamir White and Dylan Lobby touches is probably is not great for Ashton Genty, who's used to carrying a big workload. Only 47% of the routes, 61% of the snaps for Genty. Need some agua. Going to the Chargers now. We're almost at the Dolphins. Niori, I do apologize. I don't know why I thought we were so far ahead. Look, you gotta start thinking about the Chargers in terms of the top 3 receivers being interchangeable every week. It's not going to be like one guy is wide receiver 1 over the other. We can't look at it as a wide receiver 1, 2, 3 thing. I think all 3 of these guys between Lamb McConkey, Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen can be the wide receiver 1 in a given week. I think Keenan Allen is like wide receiver 6 on the season. I think Quentin Johnston's like wide receiver like 3, something like that. I think they're both in like the top 6. And Ladd McConkey's kind of fallen a little behind those two. But Oronde Gadsden, I think is very interesting to look at in terms of Andy Bischoff, the tight ends coach for the Los Angeles Chargers. The same Andy Bischoff that was in Baltimore in the late 2010s with a burgeoning wide receiver prospect named Darren Waller. So you're getting the same guy that helped transition Darren Waller from wide receiver to tight end, doing that now for Oronde Gadsden, who famously was a wide receiver at Syracuse. His father played for the Miami Dolphins and a couple other teams as well in the pros in the 90s. And then the fact that this is his first action on the field, 5 for 46, even though it's only 26% routes, he earned 6 targets. Like, look, the targets per route run leagues are, got their waiver wire darling here with Oronde Gadsden. You do love to see that, though. You love to see immediate target earning. Obviously it took Will Dissly being out for that, and Tyler Conklin only saw 28% of the routes. But I think it's very, very bullish to see if this is a role that could grow with Oronde Gadsden. I'm not calling him a waiver wire like pickup right now, but I think he's a guy you need to have, on the radar, because this is the exact profile that we want for receiving tight ends in fantasy. You want the guys that do not block, the guys that are, receivers first, the guys that are going to be running downfield quite a bit. Like an 8.3 yard ADOT for a tight end, typically, like if that's your average, you're in the top, like, you're in the 75% percentile in terms of like the Mark Andrews types, the Darren Waller types, the guys that get downfield, George Kittle. Those are the guys that you want downfield. Gadsden can be that. If he can run like a normal wide receiver ADOT at tight end and be like the 4th option, that's awesome. You just have to kind of temper the expectations and know that this is a burgeoning role right now for Gadsden. The fact that he still was like tight end, he's tactically a tight end 1 this week so far. Obviously, we don't have Monday Night Football, and that's going to skew that a little bit. But the fact that you got that in his first game, I think is very bullish going forward. And then, of course, and Lucio, if you're starting the one Chargers wide receiver, doesn't get a TD in a given week and having a bad time. To this point, that wide receiver has been led. Yeah, small sample. We're through 17% of the season here. Through 3 games. We can't like make definitive statements here, but we can use what we have here to talk about what we got. So, Najee Harris obviously got hurt, and that looked terrible as well. So I'm not super, it was a non-contact Achilles injury in the second quarter. Carted off. Marion Hampton, we talked about him a little bit earlier in terms of that's a guy where there's not much behind him. Hassan Haskins, I'm not sure what else is on the practice squad behind Hampton, but I'm very interested to see if this is like something where you're going to start seeing 80% of, what we saw in week 1, 80% of the team rush attempts. We're going to start seeing him being used in the backfield as far as, receiver stuff. He's 6 for 59 today. If we're going to be seeing that going forward, then we're going to be seeing a guy that's probably going to be an RB1 this year. We know how much Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh love to run the ball. So I think that only helps a guy like Marion Hampton. We just got to see what they're going to put behind him in terms of a Najee Harris replacement. Because I don't think it's just going to be Hassan Haskins. So, that's any running back. If you're any running back getting 6 targets a game, that's like hell. J.D. McKissick. I was rostering J.D. McKissick. I was rostering Rex Burkhead when they were in like their heydays, getting 6 targets a game. Like those are you want those guys. Going over to the Rams, this will be very short, very condensed offense. Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams combining for over 70% of the targets there. Puka Nacua is a wide receiver 1. He's averaging like 24 points per game in fantasy. He's awesome. Devontae Adams is still awesome. 356 and a touchdown, a little inefficient, but still awesome. Kyron Williams was pretty good in terms of the fact that a lot of people are fading him, especially in DFS, because they're playing the Eagles. He still got there in a receiving touchdown, 20 for 94 on the ground as well. Blake Corum, some pretty efficient volume there. And that's a role that's been growing as well. It's like Blake Corum alongside of Kyron Williams. Blake Corum's kind of been, he was playing like the closer role in week 2 against the Titans. And we're seeing a little bit more of that here. So I think that's a guy that maybe you're not quite rostering, but keeping in the back of your mind. Other than that, it's pretty, straightforward for the Los Angeles Rams. Going to the Dolphins, and, should I buy low on Tyreek? I mean, I think the public perception of him is very bearish right now. I don't know if I would buy low on him. I don't know. It depends on your roster. It depends on if that's something you need. But there is like just week-to-week volatility with Tyreek Hill. We know that when the Miami Dolphins are on, their offense is going to be very condensed. But we do know also that Tyreek Hill can be Tyreek Hill in terms of like outbursts and stuff like that. And he has the Antonio Brown walking off the field, taking his shoulder pads off kind of range of outcome there. That's the way that could end. And that's the way we could see that the Tyreek Hill story close. But yeah, it was good to see the Dolphins get back to like the condensed offense with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both scoring touchdowns. Like maybe the stat lines like totally aren't there, but the fact that you still got almost 50% of the targets between Hill and Waddle is awesome. And then you add on Devon Achane as well, where you're getting some efficiency in the run game, 12 for 62, and then you're getting 9 targets on top of that. Like that's like building your upside. Your upside is your 7 for 29 that you're getting every week, on top of like anything that you're doing on the ground, because that's just going to take you from a good back to a great back for fantasy. So definitely love me some Devon Achane. Anybody else, not super worried about. Let's go over to the Minnesota Vikings here, who didn't have to do a lot. Not a lot of heavy lifting here, especially in the passing game. Good to see Hawkinson kind of get there. I know he's had a couple subpar weeks in terms of some of the target earning stuff. But yeah, so 3 for 15 and 1 for 12 the first 2 weeks, 5 for 49, a touchdown this week. It's nice to see him get back into some of the production group there. And then, yeah, I mean, just through 3 games, like getting up to a sneaky 20% targets per route run, I think is really good for him. So I think we're going to get some pretty solid games ahead for TJ Hawkinson. We're going to get Jordan Addison back as well. So that's going to be, interesting to see how he kind of gets back into the fold here. We're probably not going to see as much Adam Thielen, so I wouldn't be opposed to just outright dropping him. I know he's going to be in the slot, but like the slot only role, where like the Josh Downish kind of slot role, where it's not going to be like Chris Godwin gets in the slot in 3 wide receivers and gets on the field in 2 wide receivers. I don't think there's going to be a 2 wide receiver role for Adam Thielen going forward. We're probably going to see more rotational stuff from Jalen Naylor as well when Addison comes back. So that's how that's going to shake out there. And then Jordan Mason, no Aaron Jones, obviously. He's going to be out for the next 3 weeks. Went on IR last week. 16 for 116 and 2 touchdowns. I thought there was going to be some more pass catching available for Jordan Mason, but that did go to Xavier Scott, and then the ghost of Cam Akers did come back to get a target as well. Yeah, Jordan Mason, you have to start thinking about it. It's like, I mean, we know he's been awesome on the ground. Dude just does not earn targets, but that's totally fine. Like, that's totally fine for like an RB2, where you're not having to depend on the receiving stuff, but you're getting enough rushing stuff and you're getting in the end zone. That's totally fine. Just know that the bad weeks are not going to be able to be supported by any of the rushing stuff. So that makes him a little bit more volatile. But still, like RB5, 23.6 fantasy points. I think that's somebody you want as far as a mid-range RB2, where you're going to get efficient volume there. Because I'm not super worried about Xavier Scott and Cam Akers like getting super involved. I mean, I know this was a blowout, so that probably led to some inflated usage between the second and third backs there, especially guys that haven't played a snap all season for the Vikings in terms of Xavier Scott and Cam Akers. So moving to the Patriots, where I think it's really interesting to see the fact that Drake May has been able to be like QB5 on the season, despite this passing game. despite Hunter Henry had the best game of the season by far, 8 for 92 touchdowns. But the fact that you're doing that with like Kayshon Boutte as the X receiver, barely doing anything outside of week one. Stephon Diggs' routes have been kind of coming down a little bit to being more of a rotational guy with the Demario Douglases and the Matt Collins and the Kyle Williams. The fact that Drake May is doing that with like this receiving, I think once you start getting the receivers, is where you can start getting Drake May into like maybe the fantasy discussion with the Jalen Hurts and the Jaden Daniels. But the fact that he doesn't really have the receivers yet, I think kind of weighs him down a little bit. But that's like the true upside for a guy like Drake May to do what he's doing without this, a really strong receiving core. 3 fumbles, 2 from Ramondre Stevenson. Drake May had a fumble as well. Sorry, 4 fumbles because Antonio Gibson had a fumble as well. Trevion Henderson was the only running back that did not fumble, so I guess he had that's the old NFL.com have a day graphics. I think Trevion Henderson deserved one there for not fumbling amongst the running backs. So that was nice to see. Hopefully we're going to get some more Trevion Henderson now that it's becoming increasingly more difficult to trust Ramondre Stevenson from like a coaching standpoint, because we know he's like, the efficiency hasn't been there for like the last 2 seasons, while we've gotten some this season. Like in Antonio Gibson, I'm sorry, in 2025, the year of our Lord, should not be getting 7 carries. So that's kind of where we're at there. But hopefully this is kind of a launching pad for a guy like Trevion Henderson. I'm going to work through these teams a little bit quicker here. The Saints, not too much to talk about there. We know Kamara's locked into a solid role there. Chris Olave, 13 targets. I think Spencer Rattler's been a lot better than I think we give him credit for in terms of like supporting some of these receivers, because he supported Chris Olave, at least in target volume. And it's also supported Juwan Johnson, who maintains his strong role, 90% snaps, 70% routes, 8 targets, 6 for 51 today. So Rashid Shaheed is like totally fine, but you don't even think he needs to be rostered right now. Even though he's running routes, I don't think that there's enough there to support more than Olave and Juwan Johnson there. That's a lot. This trade that came up, should I trade Neighbors, Chase Brown, Henderson, and Sampson for JSN, Breece Hall, Mason, and Charbonnet? Yeah, I would absolutely do that trade, by the way. Neighbors and Chase, Chase Brown. Yeah, I think I would still do that trade. You're still getting JSN. You're still getting, talented running back in Hall. Jordan Mason right now, I don't think is giving up that role anytime soon. And then Charbonnet's, quality as well. I think I would do it because Sampson is a guy who can just outright drop right now. Henderson is still speculative. Neighbors is awesome, but I think it's more volatile, and people want to say as well. And they're the next team up, and we'll talk about that. And then Chase Brown, I think, is like right there with Jordan Mason. So I think I would do that trade. Let's go over to the New York Giants. We're just talking about Neighbors. Yeah, with this offense, I think it's very hard to trust some of the Giant stuff. We saw obviously the massive blow up last week with Russ Wilson, over 500 air yards as a team. And then going over to this week against the Chiefs, 5 targets, 2 for 13. Like that was the obvious game plan to kind of stifle some of the receiving stuff. Cam Scatterbo led the way, 6 for 61 and 8 targets. And then obviously his work on the ground. Tracy left the game with shoulder injury, out for some time. So Scatterbo looks like the engine of the offense right now in terms of like the running game. You're going to get better games out of Malik Neighbors. You're going to get better games out of Wan'Dale Robinson. So I'm not like super worried there, but there is volatility with Russ Wilson as quarterback. So looking at the Jets now with Tyrod Taylor, 47 dropbacks. Still things pretty spread out. Yeah, and that's another thing too that I did want to talk about. Thank you, Lou, for reminding me. Yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson with a 19-yard ADOT. Like, we're just looking at a guy that had, I believe, a 5-yard ADOT all of last season. I do think he's taking a lot of what we've seen typically from Darius Slayton, where, that was a lot of the deep stuff there. But yeah, last week, a 16.7-yard ADOT. We just have to temper some expectations. Some of that data I had not put into the spreadsheet yet from last night's game. But, yeah, the fact that he's getting downfield, I think, is pretty bullish, because that's almost the Xavier Worthy thesis when you're talking about barbelling production, where you're scheming stuff for Xavier Worthy, Wan'Dale Robinson, short to get him some PPR usage, then you're also getting them deep for like the shot plays. So I think that's the kind of, kind of the napkin math kind of way of quantifying what Wan'Dale Robinson has done this season. And that's a perfectly fine role. Like, that's awesome. We love that. We love that, Malik Neighbors can earn the targets there. I just want to see it with a better quarterback. I want to see that with what Jackson Dart can do in this offense. And I think everybody else is sick of Russell Wilson at this point. So hopefully it's just a matter of, not if at this point, but when. And hopefully in the next few weeks here for the New York Football Giants. Back to the Jets. Garrett Wilson, 10 for 84 and a touchdown. Awesome to see. The goes to Allen Lazard in garbage time. Caught a touchdown as well. I mean, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, like, it's totally fine. I think the Breece Hall is totally fine as far as, some fantasy value there. With the Jets, I know they were in a back and forth game, and it's a pretty disappointing effort there. They kind of loaded up, some of the box stuff to dare Tyrod Taylor to throw. And Tyrod Taylor is a professional quarterback. Like, I think he's totally cromulent in terms of getting the ball out to the players he's supposed to get the ball out to. And the fact that he did that to Garrett Wilson and hyper-targeted him versus any of the other options in this offense, despite the fact you want to give rookie Arian Smith 83% of the routes, you want to give Tyler Johnson 72% of the routes. I think that's just only good for a guy like Garrett Wilson, where I don't think we have to worry about him as much if Justin Fields is still out with a concussion. Going over to the Philadelphia Eagles, this was good to see that Jalen Hurts had 37 dropbacks. The fact that the passing game is not dead, the fact that when the Eagles got pushed by the Rams in this game, that they had to do it with the passing game. They cannot be stubborn like the Packers and just run the ball into a brick wall. Saquon Barkley, we saw some of the inefficiency there. They were definitely loading up to stop him, but, we saw the condensed offense with the Eagles, with A.J. Brown, with Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert didn't really carry the end of the target volume, but he still had 1 for 33 and a touchdown. Like, 10.3 fantasy points is still tight end 9 this week, to kind of give you that reference point of that's all it takes for a tight end to be a tight end 1. So A.J. Brown, not dead. Devonta Smith, not dead, can still carry targets in a given week. And this was always the thesis with the Philadelphia Eagles. You had to figure with a lot of the games last season that the Eagles were up and were never pushed by teams. If they're going to get pushed by teams, they're going to have to pass the ball. You're not going to see 447 team pass attempts like you did last season with the Philadelphia Eagles. You're not going to see that this season if teams are going to be scoring with the Eagles. And I know that was a tough run out with the Jordan Davis flock kick touchdown, to get them to kind of seal off that victory after that. But yeah, it was good to see A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith kind of get in their bag a little bit, carry some target volume, and then both get a touchdown. Going over to the Steelers, we know this is an uncondensed offense. DK Metcalf did have an awesome contested catch, though. So I'm not a big fan of this receiving game in terms of guys I want to roster for fantasy. Like, I had DK Metcalf as a very, he's like my wide receiver, 45 this season. And maybe that was pushing it a little bit, but that's how low I felt about this offense. And I know there's only, there's still a lot of games left, but I'm still not super interested. DK Metcalf is very touchdown dependent. Calvin Austin's always going to get on the field, and I think he's he's a sneaky deeper league flex play. He's always going to be on the field, and he's always going to be involved as well. And I think he has a lot more juice than people give him credit for too. I was very interested to see Jonnu Smith end up getting 84% of the routes, well over Pat Freiermuth. I think that role is still pretty shared within the offense. So that's why I'm not rostering either Pat Freiermuth or Jonnu Smith. But I do think it's very interesting to see that Jonnu got a lot more routes this week, if that's something that can be built off of going forward. Jaylen Warren, very strong role. Caleb Johnson in the doghouse. Kenny Gainwell had a touchdown as well. So I'm not super like thrilled by that because that's stuff that's taken away from Jalen Warren. But the role is still pretty strong there. 70% of the team pass attempts almost. 5 for 34 in the receiving game. We love our backs to get involved in the passing game too. So look, Workman like 13.1 fantasy points, RB16. Totally fine role there. Not super worried about anything else of the surroundings. In Pittsburgh, over to San Francisco, a lot of injuries. Obviously, George Kittle's been out. Juwan Jennings is out. That really led the way to very condensed utilization and target volume for Ricky Pearsall and Christian McCaffrey. Just talked about running backs getting receptions. Christian McCaffrey, Travis Kelce his way to 14 targets, 10 for 88. You obviously love to see it. He's put together the quietest 3 weeks of 20 plus fantasy points I think we've ever seen. 24 fantasy points today on 89% of the routes, 91% of the snaps. We love to see it. In terms of Ricky Pearsall, had an awesome catch on the near sideline later on in the game to kind of get over the 100-yard hump there. I think that was his last catch, but definitely awesome to see that Ricky Pearsall carried a lot of the air yards too. 163 full route participation. Never great when you see Kendrick Bourne get 81% of the routes. Dusty Sky Moore getting 63%. But that's kind of where we are with the 49ers right now in terms of you're trying to kind of backup quarterback throwing to your wide receiver, your preseason wide receiver 3, and your wide receiver like what was Kendrick Bourne, like the wide receiver 10. That's where we're at right now. And the wide receiver 2 and 3, or tight end 2 and 3, Luke Farrell and Jake Tongas. It's not great, but they're like kind of making it work with like the guys that we know can make it work. So that's what we like to see there for the San Francisco 49ers. Going to Seattle Seahawks. Who knew that Sam Darnold could potentially support the overall wide receiver 1 right now? It's not it's Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't think can be the overall wide receiver 1, but he's been fantastic through 3 games. I think definitely an upgrade there where you got to start thinking about him as a top 12 wide receiver in football now, especially in fantasy. If you're redrafting this, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba definitely would belong in the late first with like in that Brian Thomas, Nico Collins range. Torrey Horton had an awesome touchdown catch as well. So it's good to see him get involved in not just that, but to get 76% of the routes as well. I know a lot of the Seattle guys ended up coming off the field because of the blowout. So you can't really take a lot of like the snaps and the routes to total heart, but it's good to see that JSN, Cooper Kupp, and Torrey Horton got well involved. And then looking at like Torrey Horton from like game by game here, we're seeing the role kind of expand where he's got touchdowns in his last 2 games. The routes have come up to a season high 76% from 65 and 51%. The target share is definitely coming up to, as well as the targets per route run. So that's somebody who I think is and I'm going to write about him today, Torrey Horton, as like a lower end ad for fancy going forward for week 4. So I'm very interested to see Torrey Horton's kind of resume kind of build with Cooper Kupp there. Because I don't think he can be the wide receiver 1 in Seattle, but I think it's like the wide receiver 2 there is kind of a locked in guy. I think definitely has the path to that. And then nothing else really in the receiving game. Ken Walker had 2 touchdowns, pretty inefficient. And then he kind of ceded the way to George Alani and some guy named, who I definitely have heard of before today, Jacardia Wright, who sounds like, ask your doctor if Jacardia Wright is right for you. Going forward, we're going to see more Zach Charbonnet, obviously, when he is healthy. I still think this is a pretty coin flip backfield. This is almost like the Devils backfield between Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet, where it's going to basically depend on the game script each week when it comes to how we feel about these guys. I think you can still start both, but, I don't think you can really weigh one over the other. Going over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just 3 teams left, and we're going to get out of here. Mecca Buka battling injuries on the injury report. still gutted through 61% of the routes, 6 for 85 leading the team. Mike Evans with a hamstring injury. We'll see how that shakes out there. Yeah, so still caught a touchdown. Like Mike Evans is like totally fine, but I think the hamstring, obviously you got to worry about that and see what's going to be coming with that. Sterling Shepard, 4 for 80. We could be seeing some Chris Godwin back though. So I think that when Chris Godwin is back, I don't know if he's going to be getting the 2 wide receiver snaps. That's going to be a very interesting thing to see what they do when it's Evans, Igbuka, and Godwin, because Godwin's typically been slot in 11 personnel and then coming back to play flanker in the 2 wide receiver sets. So that's going to be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. But for right now, if Evans is out and it's Igbuka, Shepard, and Godwin, I think you're going to be seeing Igbuka and Godwin as the 2 wide receivers there. And then obviously when Evans comes back, he's locked in. So that's going to be interesting there. Bucky Irving, obviously a very strong role, 29 opportunities, 29 touches, 74% of the team rushing attempts there, 61% of the routes, 74% of the snaps. Love to see that for sure when they were pushed a little bit by the Jets. For the Tennessee Titans, Calvin Ridley, I think we got to rethink the thesis on Calvin Ridley. It does not feel good to start him. Really, any of these passing game guys, and then that includes Io Manor, I think you have to be very cautious with knowing the range of outcomes for like a guy like Cam Ward that is still learning, kind of how to play quarterback in the league. It's really good to see that he got 45 pass attempts or dropbacks though. Kind of letting Brian Callahan, letting him kind of throw it out the way that Bobby Slowick was doing with CJ Stroud in his rookie season. So I think that's very interesting as well, to let him kind of just throw through it, get reps, and then just kind of, grow a rapport with some of these guys like the DKs and the Io Manners. And, obviously Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, those guys aren't going to be long for this team. Cam Ward's going to have to figure out who the guys are going to be. And so is Brian Callahan in terms of who the guys are going to be building with Cam Ward going forward. So it's good to see a guy like Io Manor, just continue to get production in this offense. And then going forward, like, let's look at Io Manor here, yards per route run, like 8 grade. I think that's kind of a reflection of the offense there, but still earning targets on 20% of his routes. It's one of every 5. He's been pretty touchdown dependent, hasn't had a game, better than 456, but 6 targets per game for a guy like Io Manor that we were taking that went undrafted in like redraft leagues and like in best ball, you're taking in like the 17th and 18th round. I think a good return on investment so far. I think eventually we're going to see him kind of usurp some of the and consolidate some of the outside role there. I think Calvin Ridley's kind of locked in now, but the fact that the Locketts and the Jeffersons are still hanging around is like not great for him. And then you're saying DK kind of be the design touch guy, but going forward, like Chigakonkwo is like a totally fine streaming tight end there, but not super like interesting. So I think you gotta have to weigh that matchup by matchup. Tony Pollard's role, very strong. 70% of the team rushing attempts for him, 78% of the routes, 91% of the snaps. Don't have to worry about that, anytime soon. Obviously, when Tajay Spears comes back, I think maybe there's a little bit of a worry there, but, still with like Julius Chestnut as your backup, I don't think you have to worry too much about anything taking off the top of Tony Pollard. And then our final team, the Washington Commanders. I didn't think you had to worry too much about Marcus Mariota as it relates to Terry McLaurin, because the 2 games that he had last season where Martin Mariota did get at least into the game and was passing quite a bit, he did target McLaurin. The touchdowns primarily went to the tight ends in those games, but that Luke McCaffrey was a late touchdown there. There really wasn't a lot going on in terms of the receiving game here. Not super bullish on Terry McLaurin really going forward. He had 10 targets, but it's all been very inefficient, and that's been because Jade Daniels hasn't been like super great, and also, Debo has been really good the last 2 games. Dud game this week, 2 targets, 2 catches for 11 yards. And then moving over to the running game, where that is a complete hot mess. Chris Rodriguez got a lot of the early carries. Jeremy McNichols had that huge carry as well. Touchdowns for JCM and McNichols. I do think that JCM is like the one guy that you can start with some kind of confidence, but still it is a very hot mess backfield where you're not super into like any of these guys. So once bye weeks hit, you're not going to be able to make a lot of the decisions here with like a guy like Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, where you're kind of starting him and hoping for a touchdown. You want to see some of the touches consolidate, and then you want to see also, you know, if McNichols is going to be kind of like a Eckler-ish role there, you know, if that's going to be a thing with JCM taking some of the early down stuff, then maybe you can make a case for like McNichols. But, you know, as it stands right now, for me, it's JCM, Nichols, and then Rodriguez, where I think Rodriguez is just kind of a pure backup, even though he did start, you know, the game. And I don't understand the fascination with Chris Rodriguez, a guy they cut twice, and really don't care that he's on the roster, but yet they're still giving him like 11 carries and leading the team. I don't really quite get that, but I think this is more of a wait and see backfield where we kind of got to see how it's going to shake out post Eckler. And then obviously Marcus Mariota being in there does kind of hurt things too. So yeah, that's those are all the teams that played in week 3 so far. Obviously we have Lions and Ravens going on tonight. So that'll be a fun game as well. High over 50 there. So that should be a lot of fun as far as if you like offense, that's your game. But we will be back next week, same time, same channel. Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros is going to be on with me. We're going to be talking about week 4 slate. Very interested. Go check out the Optimus Fantasy YouTube. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Would be awesome. Go check out our free Discord. That is also, the link is there in the description below. We're all there to answer any of the questions that you have for week 4 or even tonight's game. If you have questions about some of the Lions or the Ravens there for DFS or, you know, Showdown or anything like that, we'll be in the Discord to answer those. But anyway, going to get out of here. I'm Kevin Tompkins, and we will see you this time next week.